And hello, everybody, and welcome to this week 8 of the Crusaders side stories featuring Alquil Red Moon. I am the DM Brad, and joining me today is Thor to once again reprise his role as Alquil for this. What may or may not be the final sort of session of this adventure, depending on what happens. In many ways. So, before we begin and get into the action, uh, Thor, if you would please tell us what happened last week in your adventures. Yes, indeed. So, as we sort of kick things off, we basically see there is this circle of thrones arranged around the hill, one of which has sort of opened up, risen up from the ground, and there's this big kind of like arched entryway, out of which Alquil and Hengar are currently sort of striding. Alquil, you have this horn in your possession, and it's large. It's outsized for a human. Obviously, having been intended for giants, it kind of takes both of your hands to carry it properly. And you can see just a little bit more about it. It appears to be like carved out of some sort of like tusk. Like it reminds you, like the size and shape of it sort of reminds you of the those like woolly mammoths that you saw. They're sort of like big, long tusk. It looks as though it's been like carved out of one of those. It's open on both ends, so it's more like kind of like a war horn, right, than like a drinking horn. And you can see it's got carvings like all along the side of it that appear to be sort of have different scenes, depictions of. There's like a figure at the head of a long ship, blowing into this horn, and you see it scattering away hordes of dragons in the sky. And there's like pictures of what appear to be like frost giants, sort of just like triumphantly celebrating, an axe buried deep into the back of a dragon. And you just see these sort of like scenes on the side of it. Yeah, as you're sort of like looking over this thing, like climbing out of here, again, it's sort of like the middle of the night, so it's very dark. But you, with your dark vision, can see this figure approaching up from the opposite side of the hill, sort of pushing between these two thrones. Massive, huge frame. You see what appears to be a female frost giant, hair shaved on one side of her head, the other half kind of like combed over, right? So it's got that sort of like sort of hairstyle there, wearing like sort of some very like thick sort of like leather armor, accented with fur. You see, boots, heavy greaves. The arms are bare, but has this sort of like chest piece and like shoulder pads, and like a rudimentary helmet, and is dragging basically like on a chain this massive like anvil. Rather than having like an axe, she has this big anvil on a chain, and you see like a couple of like massive hand axes sort of tucked away on the belt as well. And as she sort of like she puts a hand up, is like pulling her way through this area. Obviously, you with your superior sort of like dark vision range, notice this creature before like it notices you. As it's sort of like poking up at the top of the hill. It doesn't strike you that they've like seen you just yet. So yeah, what do you do basically right as it's sort of like cresting the hill and about to like enter into the open? Sure. Um, all right, yeah. So you like grab him. Obviously, he can't really see too well. You've got the light of the full moon, so there's like a little bit of illumination to see by, enough that he can kind of like follow after you. Um, I guess you kind of like run around behind the main throne that's kind of risen up. You see? All right, yeah. So you do that. We'll say as you're doing that, this creature is sort of pushing its way into the center. Can you make a stealth check for me? Because this creature is slightly faster than you, given its large size. um, all right. So yeah, as this creature like pushes its way up, and you kind of like run around the side, you hear it begin to like speak, and it's speaking in giant, so you understand what it's saying, and it sort of says, "O Jarl of Jarls, I have come here seeking your mighty horn to bless Jarl Storvold, the rightful ruler of all frost giant kind." And I think as it's like saying this, it like sees you for like a brief moment, like kind of like goes on the defensive and shouts out like in giant, "Who goes there? Who dares defile these sacred grounds?" And he sort of like nods and says, I do not think so either. It is far too large. The stride of its legs longer than ours. And kind of like thinks over. So, what is he plan then? And he sort of like nods, like grabbing his axe, and he says, "Very well. Come hell or high waters, let us see what this giant is capable of." All right. Yeah. So you're sort of like there. It hasn't made any like approach. Like it hasn't like stepped closer to like approach you, but it's kind of like looking in your vague direction, and again, sort of like shouting basically, like, "Who goes there?" Um, mm-hmm. Yes. All right, sure. So it takes both hands. So you have to put your weapon down to do this. It takes both hands. You lift it up, and it's heavy, right? Because it's size for a giant, and you like blow into it. And at first you feel like it's kind of ridiculous because just the mouthpiece is so large that you wouldn't really be like blowing enough air into it. But as you do, suddenly there's this like swell. You feel like this tingling in your fingers as the sound of your of you like blowing into this horn just suddenly is magnified to like an extreme degree, and you hear this like thunderous like echoing war horn sound out the other side. Obviously, far more than your lungs would have been capable of producing. Um, and this 60-foot blast, basically, of energy erupts out from you. And let me go ahead and okay. So it does like the giant is like staggered right by this sudden like blast of force, but it doesn't quite seem to like blow them away or sort of like affect them fully. Can you roll 8d6 for me? All right, so the giant succeeded, so it takes 12 points of thunder damage and is not deafened by the blast. And that would be your action basically. And as it turns, it sees you, and like narrows its eyes, and it says, "The sacred horn of the Jarl of Jarls, you would dare defile it with your small folk lungs!" And like you see, you've like angered it very very much. Do you want to move at all or anything like that? He says, "I do not speak their language, but even I could tell that much." All right. At the end of your turn, from your current position, you're not quite sure exactly what happens. But this giant, as it's like stepping towards you, ready to like, it's like lifting this sort of chain, like swinging it around, ready to like sort of send it flying in your direction. It stops for like a moment, looking up towards the throne, um, sort of furrowed brow, and it you see like a confused kind of like expression on its face, and then you hear this sort of like raucous sound, basically, of the crows above sort of begin to fly around like more quickly, like cawing wildly as two basically like swarms, similar to what you were attacked by, begin to descend down towards this giant. And you hear a voice. You don't see necessarily what happens, but you hear like a voice echoing through the area again in giant, and it says, "Children of my children, you have long forgotten the ways. This one is the only one capable of bringing the giants back into the fold." And these crows sort of descend and begin to attack. Unfortunately, they are not able to sort of pierce through the thick armor, but they are doing a good job sort of distracting it. Um, and Hangar sort of like looks at you and he says, "I am not quite sure what is going on, but it would seem as though the birds are on our side this time." And he's going to sort of like look over towards the giant, and I guess yeah, he's going to. He can't necessarily make it in. So I think he's going to run up about here. Yep, and he is going to hurl a javelin. What? That's not right. Why is it rolling? How did I roll a 70 on a d20? How is it? What? How is it adding 70 to the roll? Oh, wow. Somehow the 7 became a 70. Yeah, he rolls an 82 on his attack roll. Easy. Alright, here we go. This should be right now. Alright, there we go. There you go. Alright, so yeah, he just throws. Let me see here. Yeah, hitting it sort of in the torso. So it's 14, half to 7, as it just sort of like hits into the armored torso of this giant and isn't able to quite pierce all the way through. And I think that is where he shall remain. Meanwhile, this giant, now being sort of pestered by these swarms of ravens, is just shouting like, "What is the meaning of this? Have even the spirits of our ancestors betrayed our kind?" And is going to just swing, basically, like, it begins swinging the anvil and then just, like, twirls it around over its head, like, swinging at all the birds. I'm just going to use, because it does the same damage, so I'm just going to use this. Okay, so both managed to strike the birds. The first one doing 9 points of damage and not dispatching that one, and then that one is 16. So it was unable to dispatch like either swarm, although obviously heavily damaging them, just with the number of birds taken out by this anvil swinging around its head. And then it is your turn once more, Elquil. Okay. I'll say you can do kind of like both at once. Like you can just drop the horn for free, and then you can sort of pull out the sword and equip the shield as like the action. Okay. If that is all, then. All right. The ravens continue just sort of like pestering the frost giant, sort of picking at the armor and trying to get at exposed bits of skin. This one's at half health. Manages to get in there. 7 points of damage. And then the other one, that is not quite enough to get through the giant's armor and guard. Hangar is going to run up. Yep. He's going to just begin hacking at the legs of this giant, seeing that's all he can reach. One. Wow. Get him critting. Second attack does not hit, but the first obviously does, and the last one does as well. So he deals 8 points of damage with the first swing. And 7 with the last one. Alright. The giant is going to once more just sort of swing around trying to deal with these ravens. Right. So that is okay. So one of them is basically completely destroyed. Just raven body is sent scattering across the throne over here, but the other one is still just barely there. And it is your turn. So both of the legs are heavily armored, sort of leather greaves and thick furred boots, and its torso as well. But its head and both arms are sort of exposed. You can, I would say, probably just to because in combat creatures are always moving. I would say it would probably be a contested check of some sort, like your charisma, your spell casting check, versus probably like its dexterity. Just straight up, just like a spell casting ability check. Okay. All right. So yeah, it is unable to like react in time, basically, as it like sees you running up and you sort of misty step onto its shoulder, and it kind of like looks over at you, like glaring. Yeah. All right. Both of those hit for 19 total points of slashing damage. All right. The raven, the last remaining swarm of ravens, is going to swoop in and manage to hit for 6 piercing damage. Whoops, that's not right. I didn't want to set it to -6. Thank you. All right. And then Hengar is going to do his best to kneecap the thing. Only hits once. Manages to do 9 points of damage. Not bad. This thing is like it's bloodied now from the attacks, especially after you kind of went after its head, kind of cut across its cheek. All right, it is going to reach over. Using its action, you see it's like it lets go of the chain with one hand. It kind of reaches over to its shoulder and tries to like grab you. Go ahead and make an athletics or acrobatics check. All right, 20. Okay, it does manage to grab you. So it's like grabs you and kind of like send this back and begins to like pull you off its shoulder and now like holds you in front of it, and it just sort of says, "Puny small folk, know your place," and is going to use its other attack to basically throw you at this throne. So it does so. So you get thrown. Can you make a, we'll say a dexterity save? Okay, 14. Let me see here. There's no other abilities it has that use that. So let me say it's 6. Okay. I will say a 14 is sufficient to sort of catch yourself or kind of like roll or something of the likes to reduce the damage. So you are thrown and take 10 points of bludgeoning damage as you are thrown and basically like land in the throne to the south here. You kind of like land up against the back and are kind of fall here. And then it is your turn. No, because of your save, you managed to sort of like roll and kind of catch yourself before you fell prone. Ooh, and make a con save. Well, I guess it's not a. Yeah, it's not. It's not higher than 10, so you're fine. Okay. This is definitely a hit. All right, 15 necrotic damage. Nice. Yeah, that's pretty good. It's about probably like 10 feet or so. I'm trying to picture like a giant sitting down. So probably maybe like 15 feet. Okay. This swarm of ravens still around, still pestering. Nope, not doesn't manage to hit this time. Hangar is going to take his attacks. Still, nope. The first one does hit, so he hits twice. For 7 and 9. All right. And then the giant is going to swing at the birds. Ooh, nice miss. And then is going to swing at Hangar. That will hit Hangar. Oof, 31 damage. He's just sort of like broadsided by this anvil, basically, that like swings at him and kind of like almost sends him like flying back. He like skids in the ground with his one good arm, dragging, and then kind of like and like charges back into battle. But that was a heavy like blow. He's looking pretty rough now. You're not sure if you could take another one of those. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So like the giant attacking would probably be a better thing because it has to actually be like an in-game visible like thing that you can see. So you can't just say the end of somebody's turn because that's not a phenomenon you can observe. But yeah, you can say like after Hangar finishes his attacks, or maybe like when the frost giant goes to attack. Yeah, then you can do that. Okay. Um, very well. The ravens going to continue to swarm. Ooh, ravens doing a whole lot of 4 damage on a crit. Right. Hangar makes his attacks. Oof. Okay, manages to hit 2 this time. For 5 and 6. The giant just yells out in fury, basically, at this scene, and does swing its anvil towards Hengar. All right. Let me just double check exactly what that does. Gavel, gavel, gavel of the Van Run. Yep. Strike a point. First time it deals damage to another creature. It basically just takes half of the damage to itself. All right, cool. So it swings at Hangar, hitting. And that deals 11 psychic damage. Hangar takes 23. Hangar sort of sent back a bit, kind of like gritting and bearing with it, like basically just like barely holding on, blood streaming down from his forehead over his face, and the giant just like winces in pain. What the? And takes the 11 psychic damage, and then just in fury, sort of like swings out again with the anvil. Hangar. Ooh. So it swings around. It's like clutching its head because like just like bleeding, and it's swinging the anvil around, and it comes from the side and just slams Hengar like full on the flat of the anvil, and he just gets sent like catapulting basically like over here, like slamming into this throne from the force, and you see he just is knocked unconscious, just falls to the ground. Like coughing up blood basically as he like slams into the throne. And the giant kind of begins to like stagger backwards a bit, like grabbing its head. And it is your turn. Okay. Make an acrobatics check. It's not a hard DC. Yeah, you are able to slide down without falling or taking any damage. All right. A 10 is insufficient. Okay. The ravens once more descend down towards this giant, who's like again like clutching its head, pretty heavily like wounded at this point in time, and they are going to descend. That is a hit. Ooh. 4 points of damage. You can see now that they're actually like pulling at like flesh and kind of like tearing off like chunks of the giant's flesh from its like still living form. It is still conscious, but like pretty heavily battered at this point. All right. So the giant swings out in retaliation at these ravens, destroying the rest of them, sort of sending them scattering. And then they fly over here, and then you see it begins to kind of retreat back the way it came, heavily, like bleeding heavily, grabbing its head. Just like, it is your turn. You currently, yeah, you'd have to move a little bit because you don't have line of sight because the throne is blocking it, and it went down the hill. Um, just barely, I think. Okay. All right. How do you do this? It's usually like a spectral hand or something like that. Yeah, so just filled with sort of like part like rage and part desperation, you reach out, and this hand of like snow and ice rises up, grasping the giant by the throat, and you just see it's like like sucking the life out the giant, like clawing desperately, trying to get this hand off before its life force is like sucked out, and then you just see it sort of begins to slowly like fall to one knee, and then just collapses out of sight along the side of the hill with this loud like rumbling, basically, as its body just like falls to the side of the hill in amidst the snow. Okay. Well. All right. All right. So then you have another go. All right. You cast your cure wounds, and after a brief moment, you just hear like, "Oh, oh, oh, by the gods! I thought that my time had finally come." And he just sort of like puts his hand like on your face. He just says, "Oh, my brother, you have saved my life again." Yeah, and you see he doesn't really have like the energy right now to like celebrate, but you see like a weak smile on his face as he just sort of like kind of like slumps down, and he sort of says, "Indeed, we have, but now I think I need a rest, perhaps for a few weeks." Ugh. Sure, sure. Um, yeah. So you it takes a little while, right, to sort of slowly walk him back to where you had your little campsite set up, and then you return to the hilltop. And as you arrive, you see once more these sort of like spectral frost giants arranged in their thrones. Um, I guess like when you go to investigate the corpse of the giant, you can see in the like time that it took you to like go back and return Hangard to the camp and come back here. You see that the ravens have like basically picked its bones clean, and you now just see like this skeletal frost giant like half buried in the snow. Um, no, it didn't have seem to have any sort of like bag or anything. It just had its like armor and like this weapon that it was dragging with them, a couple like hand axes and whatnot. Doesn't really seem to have anything. All right. So yeah, as you approach, you can see that the horn is not quite where you left it. It seems to be sort of like in the center of the hill instead. Like it's somehow moved there. Um, and yeah, as you like reach down and like pick it up again, you see at the throne at this point the throne has like closed down again, sealing off the entrance to the vault underneath. And you see this sort of like large like frost giant kind of like leaning on one arm, like looking down at you, and it sort of says in giant you hear this voice. It seems to sort of be coming from him, but also maybe like almost like it's coming from all of the giants around you, like simultaneously, but mostly from him. Um, and they sort of speak out again, just speaking in giant, and they sort of say, "Son of man, you have proved yourself worthy to carry my legacy." And he says, "My kin and the kin of my kin have lost their way. Anam is displeased. They need someone to bring them back to reason." to restore them on their rightful path. Yeah, you've heard about that. Yeah. And the ghostly giant sort of nods and says, "Even in my ancient slumber did I feel the All Father casting his gaze down upon us in disappointment at what my kin have become." And he sort of says, "Tell me, son of man, will you commit to this path, to seeing an end to this cycle of destruction, of opening the eyes of my descendants, my kin?" And he just sort of says, "Seek the Oracle. There is one who has already begun the search. He is close. You know of him. He shall find you when the time is right." Yeah, the ghostly giant sort of nods. And he sort of nods and he says, "I thank you, son of man. Please open the eyes of my kin, that they might see the error of their ways." And yeah, you see like the ghosts begin sort of like fading, one by one. And he says, "My horn, my prized possession, it is yours to use. Do so wisely." And he sort of fades out. Yeah, I will go ahead and give you this handout now for it. So, it is Jarl Regiarva's Horn of Blasting. And it functions much similarly to a regular Horn of Blasting, with a few tweaks. It has basically twice as much range, is louder, twice as loud, and deals a little bit more damage, basically. And you can basically use it free of charge once per day without it exploding in your face. And you can attempt to use it more times than that, but then it will still have the normal chance of blowing up in your face. Yes. Yes, you do. The DC is 15. Yeah, and basically, it doesn't require attunement, much like a normal Horn of Blasting does not. However, should anyone other than you, or I guess Hengar, attempt to use it, it will basically revert to like normal Horn of Blasting stats and potentially have a chance of blowing up in their face. You are the only one for whom it is empowered. Yeah. Oh, the normal Horn of Blasting. Yeah. And then there's like the 16d6 if it's glass or crystal, but it's probably unlikely to come up. But you never know, maybe. No crystals here. No crystals in this campaign. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think you return and find Hengar just passed out basically. Um, he's like bandaged some of his wounds as best he can, um, with his one arm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you two sort of rest the night in this little sort of snow hovel that you have created, and yeah, you finish the long rest of that night, and yeah, I think when you awake the following morning, Hangar obviously is still kind of suffering a bit from his injuries. He is not a he's not a player character, so he can't just wake up and just be completely healed. So yeah, he's sort of like wincing in pain as he's like getting up, and he says, "Well, it has certainly been a journey, but I think this is where we will have to part. I do not think I will be able to continue much further with these injuries, and I really must be getting home." And he sort of nods and kind of like puts his arm on your shoulder, and he says, "It has been a pleasure fighting alongside you again, Alquil." And he says, "There is much work yet ahead of both of us. I wish you the best of luck in whatever you choose to pursue." He sort of nods and he says, "I, for one, shall continue my quest to unite my peoples once more, and perhaps live up to the name of our hero of Eld." And he says, "One day we may be once again a united people under one king." And he sort of nods. And he says, right, let us make for civilization, as you say, and I will find my way home from there. Sure, yeah. Um, I think probably, yeah, Tourmaline. Yeah, so we can just skip ahead. Basically, the you return to Tourmaline, part ways with Hengar, who goes to return to wherever it is his clan has sort of set down their roots for now, bidding you farewell. And yeah, I think you are able to procure whatever resources you may think you need. So you can go ahead and do that. And yeah, um, and then I assume basically you are going to make the ascent once more to go meet with Bilrug. Very well. So I think we are again just sort of going to kind of like montage through the travel as you make your way up the familiar routes up the side of the mountain, and once more kind of arrive at the camp, sort of like the mountain shelter that has been constructed. Um, and I think when you arrive, you see him sort of amidst the process of sort of cutting through these thick frozen logs once more, and he sort of swings his axe in, leaving it embedded in the trunk. It's kind of like wiping sweat from his brow as you approach. And he just sort of like looks over to you, and he just sort of says, "Still alive, huh? Damn." Yeah, you probably have it like a holster, sort of like strap along your back over your shoulder or something like that. And he just sort of says, "Well, I'll be. I didn't think you had it in you." He says, "What even is that thing?" and and he just sort of says, "Impressive." And he says, "So I take it you got that from the Jarl's moot then." Huh. Yes. And here I thought you'd be buried in 6 feet of snow. Hmm. Maybe you do have what it takes after all. Well, I'll be honest. I have no use for that blasted thing. And he says, I just sent you there because I was hoping that perhaps you would, well, no longer be a pain in my ass, I suppose you could say. And he sort of nods and he says, well, never let it be said that Bilrug Flamebeard isn't a man of his word. Fine. I will teach you what I know. But it's not going to be easy. So I hope that you are prepared for a rather long and harsh training session. And he sort of nods. And I think basically what we see is sort of like this kind of month long montage, right? Basically, a month long training montage of Alquil underneath the harsh tutelage of this dwarf, dragging like entire trees up the side of the mountain, cutting through like frozen stumps and logs every day, sort of like half naked, doing exercises and whatnot in this very sort of intense training regime. And I think at the end of it, I haven't quite 100% nailed down what I want this to be, but I've got a basic general idea. So basically, at the end of this training, you have gained a new feat, which I will now show to you in your journal. Show to trainers. This is Bill Rugg's training, and those are the benefits thereof. Yeah, and basically he shows you techniques by which you can sort of exploit. He can, by which you can exploit weaknesses in the armor that giants have, which is oftentimes ramshackle and sort of like filled with weak spots. His insights as a dwarf are especially sort of like potent in allowing you to like learn how to sort of bypass these defenses and kind of land more effective blows. And yes, you kind of like learn his technique for destroying like pieces of armor and opening up larger gaps in their defenses. And as well, um, you gain a new option for your channel divinity. And yeah, so with that, that pretty much brings us to the end of Alquil's side story. Um, I assume basically after the month, you kind of return once more to the 10 towns, and I guess we will see where his story goes from there, if he returns later on. But you now have a couple of new weapons in the fight against this giant threat. That's fine. It's a lot, yeah. Um, all right, yeah. So I think that is where we can call it for this stream for now. Um, thank you, thank you for playing. It's been a an interesting interesting 8 weeks, and yeah, hopefully we'll see you again later when Storm King Thunder returns. But for now, bid you adieu.